In today's video, I want to give you a breakdown of how I made this Gambit photo here, so let's check it out. Welcome to day 5, ladies and gentlemen. Jason Ortega here with Blended Graphics, and in today's video we're going to be focusing on one of my personal favorite compositions that I've made. And this is going to be a lot similar to our day 3 video of the lamp, where we're going to be breaking things down layer by layer and not so much going to be a tutorial. But I promise there's still a lot to be learned from this, so let's check it out. Alright, to get started, let's go ahead and load in our main character, Gambit. And I essentially want to create something very similar to this. I want to give that effect where he is throwing these cards right in your face. However, I'm going to put my own spin on this with my own personal effects. So the very first thing that we need to do here is we need to get rid of all these cards that are in this current picture. So let's go ahead and do that. After I removed him from the background and then I just painted away a lot of the parts of this picture that I didn't want to use, we're left with something like this. And I was actually fortunate enough that where I found another picture that was very similar to this one, and his left arm wasn't actually covered up with any of the cards in that picture. So I took that and dragged that into this image here for his left arm, as well as some of the coat that wasn't being blocked. And then a couple of other things that I did was I used the clone stamp tool to get rid of that stripe across his leg. And then I just used the smudge tool to get rid of those lines by his chest as well as his waist that made him look like an action figure. I wanted him to look a bit more realistic, so I used the smudge tool to get rid of those lines there. So now we have something that looks like this. And then from this point, I just wanted to go ahead and darken him up a bit since he sticks out so much. So the first thing I did was I added an exposure layer as well as a brightness and contrast adjustment layer to just darken some of those areas up and kind of decrease the contrast a bit. And since we're going to do a little bit of color grading and add our own colors to this, the first thing I wanted to do was just desaturate him a little bit. So I added a hue and saturation adjustment layer onto him before getting ready to make those adjustments. And then since we did that, we can go ahead and start our color grading process. My go-to tool is usually the color balance adjustment layer. I find that it's really easy to get any sort of objects to blend in with their surroundings using this. And so I did that. And because our background has more of those magentas and purples and a little bit of the teal in the background, that's pretty much where the sliders went to. And just by adding that layer alone makes such a huge difference already to blend our Gambit character in with the background. So something else that we can do to make this a lot more believable is we can add some shadows. And the first thing that I wanted to do was I used the color picker tool and selected one of the dark colors of the background image and used that as the base color for our shadows. I added a layer underneath our character, and using a soft round brush with a pretty low opacity, I just started to paint underneath his feet a little bit as well as in between his legs. Since we do have that light that's coming from the background, the front of him is going to be casting a shadow. I also created some shadows on the body itself by using a couple of levels adjustment layers. And I know we're going to actually have some glows from the cards that will emit some light on the front of him, but just to have a nice starting foundation, I wanted to give him some shadows to start out with. And then at this point, I just wanted to add a second round of shadows, so I added another layer on top of them and then clipped it on there, and then I just painted a little bit more on the underside of his legs and the lower half of his body as well, just to darken that up just even more so. And now we can go ahead and start working with our highlights. And honestly, there are so many ways that we can achieve highlights. That's the beauty of Photoshop. You know, there's a million ways to achieve the same thing. I personally just kind of stuck to a couple of different methods here. The first thing that I wanted to do was I added a levels adjustment layer. I increased the highlights, and then I inverted that mask and then just painted along some of the edges of our subject of where I think the light is going to be the most visible. The next thing I did was I used the color picker tool to sample the pink color, and then I used that, clipped it on with another layer, and then just started painting along some of the edges there using a pretty low opacity brush. You know, we're going to do a couple of different highlights. On the left side of the buildings, we got more of the pink tones. On the right side, we got a little bit more of the teal. So this was the first round using the pink. And using the same method, I added the blues on the right. I even used a soft round brush and gave him a couple of glows on his eyes. And with this zoomed in, you can see that a bit better as well. We can go ahead and introduce his staff. And then I made some adjustments using the brightness and contrast layer, color balance, and levels to help blend that in a bit better as well. And at this point, I'm thinking that the picture is just still a bit too dark for my liking, and I wanted to really increase the intensity of those lights in the background. So using a soft round brush, I just added some more glow works to really elevate and amp up the light in the background and make it pop just a bit more. And since we amped that up a little bit, I threw in a brightness and contrast layer to, again, just kind of make it a little bit more dark in front of him. And now we can go ahead and start introducing these cards. So I'll turn these on, and we can actually go into our ace layer, and I'll double click on the ace itself just to bring up the original image so you can see what we're working with. Just a normal card. All I used was Command T to transform it, and then use the perspective to get it to the right look that I wanted. And since we're in this ace layer, we're going to focus on just this card to show you how I made the effects that I went ahead and copied and put them on the other ones as well. So the first thing that I did was I used a solid color adjustment layer and just found kind of like a purplish pink color that really jumped out to me that I wanted to use as the base color for this. And I clipped it onto that. And then I gave it a first round of rim lights using a white colored brush. I just painted around the edges. And let's zoom in, and then you can see that a lot better now. And then I gave it its first little bit of glow around the edges, painting around the card using that same pink color that we had as the base. And then I added a layer underneath the card and added its second round of rim lights. And I just continued to build up this effect and really wanted to emphasize the glow. So I added a second round of glows that was at a higher opacity and still kind of stuck pretty close to the card. And then I added a third one, which spread out just even more so and gave it almost like an overall glow effect. At this point, I just add those same effects to the other cards. And then I wanted to add a blur because I wanted to give you the impression that these cards are in motion. So I added a motion blur to these cards. And then I wanted to give the card some more contrast. So I gave it an exposure adjustment layer, inverted that mask, and then painted back some of the areas that wasn't the center or the edge because I wanted to leave that as the brightest spots. And now we've come to the part where I have been asked the most about how I created this specific effect. And I'm going to tell you right now, it is very easy to do, and I'll show you just how I did that. Alright, so the first thing we can do is we can click on the card layer group, and then we'll add a new layer, and we'll sample this pink color. And then we're going to go into our brush settings, and we'll choose a soft round brush, and then at the brush tip, we'll bring these angles in to create a really thin brush tip. And let's increase the brush size since you can't see it all, and we'll rotate this around, and at 100% opacity, just one dab, and it's as easy as that. From this point on, it's just about personal preference. Just go around the edge of the card of where you want to see those streaks, and then you can even go back into your brush settings and go to the brush tip, open that up some, and now you've got some variety. And if you look at my cards, especially at the middle portion of the card itself, you'll see that I have a little bit of variety between those brush streaks. And if you want to give it that highlight, just press D on your keypad there to bring up your default colors, switch to white. You can bring down the brush size, and at 100% opacity, just dab right there in the middle of your streak, and there you go. You got yourself a beautiful highlight. From there, just painted on a few more glows to just emphasize this overall effect. And now we've just come to the final step. I like how everything's looking. Everything came together real nice. So we can go ahead and merge all of these layers together, and we'll add that at the top, turn it into a smart object, and then put it into the camera raw filter, where we will just do our final touch-ups and corrections there. And this is what it looks like after the matter. And I'm satisfied with that. So from here, we can just go ahead and throw my logo on there at the bottom corner. And that's a wrap. We've completed it. This was actually the first time where I used an action figure as a subject for one of my pieces. And it came out to be one of my favorites. I had a lot of fun working on this, and hopefully you liked the picture as well. If there was something in this video that maybe I didn't explain clearly enough, or if you have more questions in regards to some of the process, please go ahead and leave me a question in the comment section there. And if you get some motivation after watching this video and you use an action figure as one of your subjects and turn it into a really cool composition, please tag me on Instagram because I'd love to check it out as well. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and hope to see you again tomorrow for our next video.